The recording light on my phone was already glowing red when I walked through my front door that Friday evening, though I didn't know I'd need evidence yet. I just had this gut feeling, the same instinct that kept me alive during 2 tours in Afghanistan and now helped me catch cheating spouses in my private investigation business. Something about Jessica's voice when she called to tell me about girls' night had that particular pitch that meant trouble. "Honey, you're home." Jessica's voice rang out from the living room, artificially bright. Too bright, like a car salesman's smile or a politician's promise. Perfect timing. I set down my keys and surveyed the scene. 8 women clustered around our coffee table, wine glasses already half empty, phones out recording everything. My wife's friends, the usual suspects from her marketing agency and yoga class. Amber, the ringleader with her perfect blonde highlights and predatory smile. Carla, who'd never worked a day in her life, but somehow had opinions about everyone else's career. Lindsay, whose husband had left her last year for his secretary. The whole toxic crew. "What's going on?" I asked, though my investigator instincts were already screaming warnings. "Surprise!" Amber announced, raising her wine glass. "We're having a roast the husband night and you're our guest of honor." The phrase hit me like a punch to the gut. Guest of honor. Right. Like being the guest of honor at your own execution. "A what now?" I managed, looking at Jessica for some explanation, some sign this was a joke that would end soon. Jessica was grinning ear to ear, her eyes bright with wine and something else. Something that looked disturbingly like anticipation. "Oh, it'll be hilarious, Matt. Just sit down and take it like a man." Take it like a man. The same phrase she'd used last month when she'd forgotten our anniversary. Again. The same phrase she'd used when she'd dented my car and told me to deal with it. I should have seen this coming. I sat down on the edge of our leather recliner, the one Jessica always complained was too old and ugly for the living room. Around me, 8 pairs of eyes gleamed with the particular malice that comes from women who've had just enough wine to lose their filters but not enough to forget their grievances. "Okay, I'll start," Amber announced, standing up like she was giving a toast at a wedding. "Matt, Jessica tells us you still can't fix that leaky faucet in the guest bathroom. What is it, 6 months now?" The room erupted in laughter, not polite chuckles, but genuine belly laughs. And Jessica, my wife of 7 years, was laughing the loudest. "Oh my God, that's so true!" Jessica gasped between giggles. "I've asked him like 20 times. I finally just put a bucket under it." "Maybe he needs a YouTube tutorial," Carla chimed in. "Or maybe just a real man to show him how it's done." More laughter. I felt my face burning, but I forced a smile. It was just jokes, right? Just harmless fun between friends. "My turn," said Lindsay, her voice sharp with divorced bitterness. "Matt, I can't believe you still drive that ancient Mustang. It's embarrassing. Like, we're adults now." "It's a classic," I started to defend, but Jessica cut me off. "He refuses to upgrade," she said, rolling her eyes dramatically. "I've been begging him to get something decent, but he's attached to that rust bucket." The Mustang was a 1987 model I'd restored myself. Every bolt, every piece of chrome, every inch of the engine rebuilt with my own hands. It wasn't just a car. It was 3 years of weekend work, of learning, of pride and craftsmanship. But to them, it was just another punchline. "Speaking of forgetting things," Amber continued, clearly warming up, "didn't you forget your anniversary? Like completely forget?" "That was once," I protested. 3 years ago." "Once is too many," Jessica said, and the room murmured agreement. I had to remind him. So romantic, right? The jokes kept coming for over an hour. My appearance, apparently, I was getting fat and going bald. My hobbies, working on cars and reading military history, were boring and obsessive. My job, private investigation, was creepy and pathetic. Each joke landed like a small knife between the ribs, and each time, Jessica laughed the loudest. Okay, Amber said, clearly saving the best for last. "Let's talk about the elephant in the room, Matt's salary. My stomach dropped. We'd had fights about money, sure, but they were private fights, personal fights between a husband and wife. I mean, isn't it kind of pathetic? Amber continued. A grown man making what, 40,000 a year? 38, Jessica corrected, and the room went quiet for a moment before exploding in shocked laughter. Jessica, Carla gasped. You didn't. What? It's true. Jessica was wiping tears from her eyes. I basically support us. I make almost twice what he does. That wasn't true. It wasn't even close to true. Yes, Jessica made more money, she was good at her job, and marketing paid well. But I pulled my weight. I paid half the mortgage, half the utilities, half the groceries. I wasn't some deadbeat husband living off his wife's success. So why are you even with him? Amber asked, and the room went dead silent. Jessica shrugged, a gesture so casual it felt like a slap. Good question. The room erupted again. 8 women laughing at the idea that their friend's husband was so worthless, so pathetic, that his own wife couldn't think of a reason to stay married to him. I sat there, humiliated, as they finished their roast. Jessica was wiping tears from her eyes, gasping about how hard she'd been laughing. The other women were checking their phones, probably already posting about the hilarious evening they'd had destroying someone's husband. Then I stood up. The room was still giggling, still riding the high of their group cruelty, when I slowly got to my feet. The laughter died down as they noticed me standing there, phone in my hand. Thank you for the evidence, I said quietly. My lawyer loves this. The room went completely quiet. You could have heard a pin drop. What? Jessica said, her face suddenly confused. I've been recording this entire evening, I said, holding up my phone. The red recording light was still blinking. You can't do that, Amber sputtered. Actually, I can. You're in my house. Single-party consent state. Everything you just said is perfectly legal evidence. Jessica's face was draining of color. Evidence of what? I'm filing for divorce on Monday, I said calmly. Citing emotional abuse and public humiliation, this recording will be Exhibit A. What? No! Jessica stood up, wine sloshing from her glass. Honey, please, don't call me that, I said. Not after tonight. It was just jokes, she protested, tears starting to form in her eyes. It was just fun. Humiliating me in our home is fun? I asked. Making me the butt of jokes about my job, my appearance, my worth as a human being is fun? The room was dead silent now. Amber was staring at her phone like she could somehow delete the last hour. Carla was already gathering her purse. Were you kidding when you called my salary pathetic? I asked Amber directly. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Were you kidding when you said you couldn't think of a reason to stay married to me? I asked Jessica. I didn't mean, yes, you did. You all did. You meant every word. The friends started leaving quickly, mumbling awkward goodbyes and avoiding eye contact. Amber paused at the door. Jessica, call me later. Don't bother, I said. She won't need you where she's going. When the last friend had left, Jessica and I were alone in our living room. The wine glasses and empty bottles suddenly looked obscene, like evidence of some terrible crime. Please don't do this, Jessica whispered. It's already done. Where will I go? Ask your friends. They're so helpful. They seem to have all the answers about our marriage. She followed me as I went to our bedroom and pulled out a suitcase. Please, think about this. What about our marriage? I stopped packing and looked at her. Really looked at her. When had she become this person? When had the woman I married turned into someone who could laugh at my pain? What about it? You just spent an hour laughing at me with your friends. You told them I was worthless, pathetic, that you couldn't think of a reason to stay married to me. I was drunk. You were honest. That's the difference. I continued packing. A few changes of clothes, my important documents, my grandfather's watch, the essentials. This is crazy, Jessica said. desperation creeping into her voice. "You're throwing away 7 years over some jokes?" "I'm not throwing anything away. You already did that." I spent the weekend at a motel near my office, a depressing little place called the Pine View that hadn't seen a pine tree since the Carter administration. The walls were thin, the carpet was older than my Mustang, and the ice machine sounded like it was dying a slow, mechanical death. But it was quiet, and I needed quiet to think. Monday morning, I walked into the law offices of Brennan and Associates looking like exactly what I was, a man who'd been sleeping in cheap motels and living on gas station coffee. Sarah Brennan was a friend from high school who'd gone on to become one of the best divorce attorneys in the state. She was also someone who didn't suffer fools or cheating spouses. "Matt," she said, standing up from behind her mahogany desk, "you look like hell." "Feel worse," I admitted, settling into the leather chair across from her. "Tell me everything." I played her the recording, all 93 minutes of it. Sarah listened without interruption, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. When it finished, she sat back in her chair and whistled low. "Jesus, Matt, this is brutal." "Can we use it?" "Can we use it? This is a divorce attorney's dream. Emotional abuse, public humiliation, financial disparagement, and it's all recorded with perfect audio quality." She leaned forward. "The question is, how hard do you want to hit her?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, with this recording, we can go nuclear. Alimony? Forget it. Property division? We can argue for emotional damages. Her behavior here is so egregious that any judge is going to side with you." I thought about Jessica's face when she realized I'd been recording. The panic, the fear. Part of me, a small part, felt sorry for her. But then, I remembered her laughing when Amber asked why she was even with me. "Hit her as hard as legally possible," I said. Sarah smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "I was hoping you'd say that." The papers were filed that afternoon. By law, Jessica had to be served within 72 hours. I made sure I was there when the process server showed up at our house. My house, technically, since my name was the only one on the deed. I was sitting in my Mustang across the street when the guy walked up to the front door. Jessica answered in her bathrobe, probably expecting a package delivery. Instead, she got a manila envelope that would change her life forever. She looked around frantically after the server left, and her eyes found me sitting in my car. Even from 50 yards away, I could see the betrayal on her face, like I was the one who'd done something wrong. My phone rang 30 seconds later. "Matt, what the hell is this?" "Legal documents, I thought you could read. This says you're asking for the house, the car, everything." "That's right. You can't do this to me. Watch me." I hung up and drove away. In my rearview mirror, I could see Jessica standing in our driveway, still in her bathrobe, clutching the divorce papers like they were a death sentence. Maybe they were. The next few days were a blur of legal meetings and paperwork. Sarah was thorough. She wanted financial records, employment history, documentation of every asset we'd acquired during the marriage. The recording was transcribed by a court reporter, every cruel word preserved in black and white legal text. "The beauty of this case," Sarah explained during one of our meetings, "is that she humiliated you publicly, and we have proof. Emotional abuse is hard to prove in divorce court, because it's usually he said, she said. But this is she said, recorded in high definition." "What's our timeline?" "Fast. With evidence this clear, we can push for an expedited hearing, maybe 6 weeks. 6 weeks. In 6 weeks, I could be free of Jessica and her toxic friends forever. The thought should have made me happy, but mostly, I just felt empty. 7 years of marriage, reduced to a legal strategy and a court date. That Thursday, I was working late at my office when I heard a car pull up outside. Through the blinds, I could see Jessica's BMW in the parking lot. She sat there for almost 10 minutes before finally getting out and walking to my door. The knock was soft, tentative. Nothing like the confident woman who'd laughed at my expense 4 days earlier. "It's open," I called. Jessica stepped inside, and I was shocked by how she looked. Her usually perfect hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, her makeup was smudged, and she was wearing sweatpants and an old college t-shirt. She looked like she'd been crying. "Matt, we need to talk." "No, we don't. Talk to my lawyer." "Please, just 5 minutes." Against my better judgment, I gestured to the chair across from my desk. Jessica sat down and immediately started crying. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to go that far." "But it did go that far. I was drunk. We all were. It was supposed to be harmless fun." "Harmless?" I leaned back in my chair. "You told your friends that you couldn't think of a reason to stay married to me. You laughed when they called me pathetic. How is any of that harmless?" I don't know. I don't know why I said those things. I guess I just got caught up in the moment." "The moment lasted over an hour, Jessica. That wasn't a moment. That was a choice. 8 different choices to humiliate me in front of your friends." She wiped her nose with a tissue. "What can I do? How can I fix this?" "You can't. There has to be something, some way to make this right." I studied her face. She was desperate, panicked. The confident marketing executive who'd organized my public humiliation was gone, replaced by someone who finally understood that actions have consequences. "Why did you do it?" I asked. "What?" "The whole roast thing. Why did you think that was okay?" Jessica was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Because I was angry." "At me?" "At everything. At my job, at our life, at the fact that we're 35 and still living like we're 25. I see my friends with their big houses and their successful husbands and their perfect lives, and I wanted to feel superior to something." "So you chose me." "I chose wrong." She looked up at me with red, puffy eyes. "I chose so wrong, Matt. I love you. I know I screwed up, but I love you." For a moment, just a moment, I almost believed her, almost felt sorry for her, almost considered calling Sarah and telling her to slow down the divorce proceedings. Then I remembered the sound of her laughter when Amber asked why she was even with me. "No, you don't," I said quietly. "You love the idea of me. You love having someone around to pay half the bills and fix things when they break. But you don't love me. If you loved me, you never would have let your friends talk about me like that." "That's not true." "It is true. And deep down, you know it." Jessica started crying harder. "Please don't leave me. I'll do anything. I'll go to counseling. I'll cut off those friends. I'll do whatever you want. I want a divorce." She sat there crying for another 5 minutes before finally gathering herself enough to leave. At the door, she turned back one last time. "I really am sorry, Matt." "I know you are. You're sorry you got caught." After she left, I sat alone in my office for a long time, listening to the hum of the fluorescent lights and the distant sound of traffic. 7 years of marriage, and it had come down to this: my wife begging for forgiveness in a strip mall office at 9 o'clock on a Thursday night. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I just felt tired. Word travels fast in our town, especially when it involves scandal. By the end of the week, everyone knew about the divorce, everyone knew about the recording, and everyone had an opinion. I was grabbing coffee at the diner near my office when I overheard 2 women talking in the booth behind me. Can you imagine? Recording your own wife like that? Well, what did she expect? You can't humiliate someone like that and not expect consequences. Still, it seems sneaky, like something a private investigator would do. I almost turned around to tell them that yes, it was exactly something a private investigator would do, because private investigators understand that evidence matters more than feelings. But I kept my mouth shut and paid for my coffee. The real drama started the following Monday when I got a call from my friend Mike, who worked at the same marketing firm as Jessica. "Dude, you need to know something. Jessica's been telling people at work that you're stalking her." "What?" She's saying you've been following her, calling her at all hours, threatening her. She's trying to get a restraining order." My blood went cold. A restraining order would complicate the divorce proceedings and make me look like the bad guy. Worse, it could affect my private investigation license. "That's complete bullshit, Mike. I haven't contacted her except through lawyers." "I know that, and you know that, but she's got Amber backing up her story. They're saying you're dangerous." Amber. Of course. The ringleader of the roast was now trying to control the narrative. I called Sarah immediately. "They're trying to flip the script," she said after I explained the situation. "Make you look like the aggressor. It's a common tactic in ugly divorces. Can they get a restraining order based on lies? They can try. But we have the recording, remember? It clearly shows who the aggressor was in this situation. Plus, if you haven't contacted her, we can prove that with phone records and surveillance footage." "Surveillance footage?" "Matt, you're a private investigator. You know how this works. We document everything. Where have you been for the past week?" I thought about it. My office, the motel, the diner, the grocery store, all places with security cameras. "I can prove where I've been every day since I moved out." "Good. Let them file their restraining order. We'll destroy it in court and make them look like liars in the process." But the damage was already being done in the court of public opinion. Jessica's version of events was spreading through our social circle like wildfire. According to her, I was a controlling, abusive husband who'd secretly recorded his wife and was now stalking her. The first friend to confront me was Dave, someone I'd considered a close buddy for over 5 years. He cornered me at the gas station on Wednesday evening. "Matt, what the hell is wrong with you?" "Excuse me?" "Jessica told us what really happened. You've been emotionally abusing her for years, and now you're following her around town like some kind of psycho." I stared at him. "Dave, you know me. Do I seem like the kind of guy who would abuse his wife? I don't know what to think anymore. She played us some of the recording, and you sound pretty cold and calculating." "She played you some of the recording? Which part?" "The part where you tell her that her friends can't help her and that she won't need them where she's going. It sounded like a threat." I almost laughed. Jessica had edited the recording, taking my responses out of context to make me sound threatening while leaving out the part where she and her friends spent an hour humiliating me. "Dave, did she play you the part where they called me pathetic? Where they laughed about my salary? Where Amber asked why Jessica was even with me?" Dave's expression shifted slightly. "She said that was just joking around." "For an hour? They spent an hour joking around about what a worthless husband I am, and Jessica laughed the loudest. Would you find that funny if it was your wife?" "Well, no, but nothing. She's lying to you, Dave. She's editing the story to make herself look like the victim." I could see doubt creeping into Dave's eyes, but he wasn't ready to admit he'd been played. "Even if that's true, recording your wife without her knowledge is pretty messed up." "It's my house, Dave. Single-party consent state. It was completely legal." "Legal doesn't mean right. Neither does humiliating your husband in front of your friends." Dave left without another word, but I could tell he was thinking. The seed of doubt had been planted. Over the next few days, more friends confronted me. Some were hostile, some were confused, but all of them had heard Jessica's edited version of events. I started carrying a copy of the full recording transcript in my car, just in case. The breaking point came on Friday night at Murphy's Bar, a local dive where our group used to meet for drinks every week. I walked in to find Dave, Mike, Tom, and 3 other guys sitting at our usual table. The conversation stopped when they saw me. "Well, well," said Tom, clearly already drunk. "Look who decided to show up." "Tom," I said, nodding. "We were just talking about you, Matt, about what a piece of shit you turned out to be." The entire bar went quiet. Murphy's wasn't big, maybe 20 people on a busy night, and everyone was now staring at our table. "Is that right?" I said, pulling out a chair and sitting down. Yeah, that's right, Tom continued. Jessica told us everything about how you've been controlling her, isolating her from her friends, recording her private conversations. Private conversations? I laughed. Tom, there were 8 people in my living room. How private could it be? You know what I mean. No, I don't. Why don't you explain it to me? Tom was getting redder in the face. He'd always been a hothead, especially when he was drinking. You're a sick, Matt. Recording your own wife, stalking her, threatening her friends. Jessica's scared to death of you. Jessica's scared? I stood up slowly. Tom, let me ask you something. If your wife invited her friends over to spend an hour making jokes about what a pathetic loser you are, how would you react? That's not what happened. That's exactly what happened, and I can prove it. I pulled out my phone and started playing the recording. Not the edited version Jessica had been sharing, but the full 93 minutes of humiliation. Jessica tells us you can't even fix a leaky faucet. Amber's voice echoed through the bar. Oh my God, that's so true. Jessica's laughter followed. The table went quiet. Other patrons were turning to listen. Maybe he needs a YouTube tutorial, Carla's voice added. Or maybe just a real man to show him how it's done. More laughter from Jessica. I let it play for 5 more minutes, through the jokes about my car, my job, my appearance, through Jessica's comment about basically supporting me financially, through Amber asking why Jessica was even with me, and Jessica's casual shrug in response. When I finally stopped the recording, the entire bar was silent. That, I said quietly, is what really happened. My wife and her friends spent over an hour humiliating me in my own home, and she laughed at every single joke. So you tell me, Tom, who's the victim here? Tom was staring at the table, his face pale. The other guys looked uncomfortable, ashamed. Why didn't you tell us? Dave asked quietly. I tried, but you'd already made up your minds based on Jessica's lies. Jesus, Matt, Mike said. That was brutal. Yeah, it was. And now you know why I filed for divorce. Tom looked up at me, and for the first time since I'd known him, he looked genuinely sorry. I owe you an apology. You owe me more than that. You called me a piece of shit in front of half the town based on lies. You're right. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix anything, Tom. Sorry doesn't take back the last 2 weeks of people thinking I'm some kind of abusive stalker. I looked around the table at these men I'd considered friends, men who'd been so quick to believe the worst about me without even hearing my side of the story. You know what the funny thing is? I said. Jessica was right about one thing. I really couldn't think of a reason to stay married to her. But I also can't think of a reason to stay friends with any of you. I walked out of Murphy's bar and didn't look back. Behind me, I could hear the murmur of conversation starting up again, but I didn't care what they were saying. The damage was done. My phone started ringing before I even made it to my car. Dave, Mike, Tom, they all wanted to talk, to explain, to apologize. I let every call go to voicemail. Some bridges once burned can't be rebuilt. Jessica filed for the restraining order the following Monday, just as Mike had warned me she would. The hearing was scheduled for Thursday morning at the county courthouse, a gray stone building that had seen more broken marriages than a Vegas divorce chapel. Sarah met me in the hallway outside the courtroom, looking confident in her navy blue suit and carrying a briefcase that probably cost more than my car. How are you feeling? She asked. Like I'm about to watch my wife lie under oath. Well, you are, but we're ready for it. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, with maybe 20 seats for observers. Jessica sat at the plaintiff's table with her lawyer, a young guy named Peterson who looked like he'd graduated law school about 5 minutes ago. She was wearing a conservative black dress and had her hair pulled back in a way that made her look vulnerable and innocent. Amber was there too, sitting in the front row behind Jessica, ready to provide moral support and corroborating lies. All rise, the bailiff called, the Honorable Judge Martinez presiding. Judge Martinez was a stern-looking woman in her 50s who had a reputation for not tolerating bullshit in her courtroom. I was hoping that would work in our favor. "Be seated," Judge Martinez said. "We're here today for a petition for a protective order filed by Jessica Thompson against Matthew Thompson. Mr. Peterson, you may proceed." Peterson stood up and launched into his opening statement. According to him, I was a controlling, abusive husband who had secretly recorded my wife and was now stalking and threatening her. He painted a picture of a woman living in fear, afraid to leave her house because her dangerous ex-husband might be waiting for her. It was complete fiction, but Peterson sold it well. "Your Honor," he said, "Mrs. Thompson has evidence of threatening phone calls, incidents of following her vehicle, and a pattern of intimidation that began when she tried to end their marriage." When he was finished, Sarah stood up for our response. "Your Honor, what we have here is not a case of domestic abuse, but rather a case of a woman who was caught humiliating her husband and is now trying to rewrite history to avoid the consequences of her actions." Sarah pressed play on the courtroom's audio system, and suddenly Jessica's laughter filled the room as her friends made jokes about my appearance, my job, my worth as a human being. Judge Martinez listened to about 10 minutes of the recording before holding up her hand. "That's enough. Mr. Peterson, call your first witness." Jessica took the stand and was sworn in. Under Peterson's questioning, she told her version of events. According to her, the roast had been harmless fun between friends, but I had overreacted and become threatening and violent. "He told me I wouldn't need my friends where I was going," she said, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. It sounded like a threat, like he was going to hurt me or make me disappear. "And since filing for divorce, has Mr. Thompson contacted you directly?" Peterson asked. "Yes, multiple times. He calls me at all hours, drives by my work, follows me when I'm running errands. I'm scared to leave the house." It was a masterful performance. If I hadn't lived through the real events, I might have believed her myself. Then Sarah stood up for cross-examination. "Mrs. Thompson, you testified that your husband has called you multiple times since filing for divorce. How many times exactly?" I don't know exactly. Several times." "Several? Can you be more specific? 5 times, 10 times, 20? "I don't keep count." "Well, that's convenient because I do." Sarah approached the witness stand with a thick folder. "Your Honor, I'd like to submit into evidence the phone records for both Mr. and Mrs. Thompson for the past 3 weeks. She handed copies to the judge and to Peterson. "Mrs. Thompson, according to these records, your husband has called you exactly 0 times since moving out of your shared residence. In fact, the only calls between your phones have been from you to him. 7 calls, to be exact." Jessica's face went pale. That can't be right." "Are you saying Verizon's phone records are incorrect?" "No, Let's move on. You testified that Mr. Thompson has been following you and driving by your workplace. Do you have any evidence of this alleged stalking?" "I've seen his car." "Where specifically?" "Around town, near my office." "Mrs. Thompson, your office is located on Main Street, correct? The same Main Street where your husband's office is located, approximately 4 blocks away?" "Yes, but..." "So, when you saw his car near your office, isn't it possible he was simply going to or from his own place of business?" I suppose." Sarah was just getting started. For the next 20 minutes, she systematically destroyed every aspect of Jessica's testimony. The threatening phone calls that never happened, the stalking incidents that could be explained by normal daily activities, the pattern of intimidation that existed only in Jessica's imagination. But the real knockout blow came when Sarah played the complete, unedited recording of the roast. "Mrs. Thompson, I want you to listen to this recording and tell me if you think a reasonable person might consider this behavior emotionally abusive." As the recording played, Jessica squirmed in the witness chair. Her laughter at my expense echoed through the courtroom, each cruel joke landing like a physical blow. When Amber asked why she was even with me and Jessica shrugged, I saw Judge Martinez's expression harden. "Mrs. Thompson," Sarah said when the excerpt ended, "in this recording, we can clearly hear you laughing as your friends mock your husband's appearance, his job, his financial situation, and his worth as a human being. Do you consider that harmless fun? We were just joking. For over an hour? It wasn't supposed to be mean. Mrs. Thompson, at one point in this recording, your friend asks why you're even married to your husband, and you respond by shrugging and saying, 'Good question.' Do you remember that?" Jessica was crying now, but they weren't the calculated tears from her direct testimony. These were tears of shame and embarrassment. "Yes." "And you're surprised that your husband filed for divorce after hearing you say that?" "I didn't mean it." "But you said it, in front of 8 people, while laughing." Peterson tried to object, but Judge Martinez overruled him. "Mrs. Thompson, you've testified that you're afraid of your husband, that he's threatened and intimidated you. But isn't it true that the only person who was humiliated and threatened in this situation was your husband?" "No, that's not." "Isn't it true that you organized this roast specifically to embarrass and belittle your husband in front of your friends?" "No." "Then why did you do it?" Jessica sat there crying, unable to answer. Finally, she whispered, "I don't know." Sarah called me as her only witness. Under her questioning, I calmly explained the events of that Friday night, my decision to record the conversation, and my subsequent actions. I presented evidence of my whereabouts for every day since moving out: receipts, security camera footage, witness statements. I had an alibi for every alleged stalking incident. Peterson's cross-examination was brief and ineffective. He tried to make me seem cold and calculating for recording my wife, but after the jury had heard what was on that recording, his arguments fell flat. When both sides had rested, Judge Martinez didn't even bother to recess for deliberation. "I've heard enough," she said. "Mrs. Thompson, your petition for a protective order is denied. Furthermore, I'm troubled by what appears to be perjured testimony in my courtroom. Mr. Peterson, I strongly suggest you counsel your client about the consequences of lying under oath." She turned to Jessica directly. "Mrs. Thompson, what I heard on that recording was appalling. If anyone in this courtroom should be seeking protection, it's your husband, not you. You subjected him to public humiliation and emotional abuse, then had the audacity to come into my courtroom and claim to be the victim. I've seen a lot of ugly divorces, but this takes the cake." Jessica was sobbing openly now, her carefully constructed victim narrative in ruins. "Furthermore," Judge Martinez continued, "I'm ordering you to pay Mr. Thompson's legal fees for this hearing. Maybe that will teach you to think twice before wasting the court's time with frivolous petitions." As we left the courtroom, Jessica tried to approach me. "Matt, please." "Stay away from me, Jessica. You just lied under oath and tried to destroy my reputation with false accusations. We're done talking." Amber, who had watched her friend's testimony fall apart, glared at me with pure hatred. "You bastard," she hissed. "You destroyed her." "No," I said calmly. "She destroyed herself. I just provided the evidence." Outside the courthouse, Sarah was practically glowing with satisfaction. "That," she said, "was beautiful. I've never seen a restraining order petition backfire so spectacularly. What happens now?" "Now? Now we go back to the divorce proceedings with even more ammunition. After today's performance, Jessica's credibility is shot. Any judge who sees the transcript of this hearing is going to side with you on everything." As we walked to our cars, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks: vindication. Jessica had tried to paint me as the villain, but the truth had won out. The recording that had started this whole mess had also ended it. Justice, it turned out, really was blind, but it wasn't deaf. The divorce hearing was scheduled for a crisp Tuesday morning in October, exactly 6 weeks after that Friday night that had changed everything. I woke up in my new apartment, a decent two-bedroom place across town that I'd rented with the settlement money Sarah had negotiated, and felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. The past 6 weeks had been a whirlwind of legal proceedings, depositions, and asset division. True to her word, Sarah had used the recording and the failed restraining order to devastating effect. Jessica's credibility was so damaged that her own lawyer had recommended accepting our settlement offer rather than risk a trial. I kept the house. I kept my car. I kept my retirement accounts. Jessica got her personal belongings and enough money to start over somewhere else. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice. But Jessica wasn't going quietly. I was putting on my best suit when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Amber's number. "What do you want, Amber?" "You bastard!" she snarled. "Do you know what you've done to her?" "I know exactly what I've done. I've held her accountable for her actions. She's broken, Matt. Completely broken. She can't eat, can't sleep, can't function. Are you happy now?" "I'm not happy or unhappy. I'm just done." "This is all your fault." I almost hung up, but something made me stay on the line. "My fault? Amber, you're the one who organized the roast. You're the one who asked why she was even with me. You started this whole thing." "We were just having fun." "No, you were being cruel. There's a difference. You didn't have to record us. You didn't have to humiliate me in my own home." There was a long pause. When Amber spoke again, her voice was quieter, less certain. We didn't know you were serious about the divorce." "What did you think would happen? That I'd just laugh it off and pretend it never happened?" "I don't know. Maybe." "Well, you thought wrong." I hung up and finished getting dressed. An hour later, I was sitting in the courthouse waiting room with Sarah, reviewing the final paperwork. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Ready to be done with this. Any regrets?" I thought about it. 7 years of marriage, reduced to a stack of legal documents and a property settlement. There should have been regrets, sadness, some sense of loss. Instead, I just felt relief. "No," I said. "No regrets." Jessica arrived 20 minutes late with her lawyer. She looked terrible, thin, pale, with dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't hide. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then I remembered her laughing when Amber asked why she was even with me. The hearing itself was a formality. Judge Williams reviewed the settlement agreement, asked a few perfunctory questions, and signed the papers. Just like that, 7 years of marriage were officially over. "Congratulations, Mr. Thompson," Sarah said as we left the courtroom. "You're a free man." Jessica was crying in the hallway, her lawyer trying to console her. I walked past without a word, but she called out to me. "Matt, wait!" Against my better judgment, I stopped and turned around. "I just want you to know," she said through her tears, "that I really did love you." "No, you didn't," I said quietly. "You loved having me around. You loved having someone to split the bills with, someone to fix things when they broke, someone to feel superior to when your life wasn't going well. But you didn't love me." "That's not true. Jessica, if you had loved me, you never would have let your friends talk about me like that. If you had loved me, you would have defended me instead of laughing along. Love doesn't humiliate. Love doesn't mock. Love doesn't shrug when someone asks why you're with the person you supposedly care about." She was sobbing now, but I wasn't done. "You want to know the truth? I stopped loving you a long time ago. That night just gave me the excuse to finally admit it." I turned and walked away, leaving Jessica crying in the courthouse hallway. Sarah caught up with me at the elevator. "That was harsh," she said. It was honest. "Sometimes they're the same thing." The elevator doors closed, and I watched the floors count down to ground level. When they opened again, I stepped out into the lobby and felt the weight of 7 years lift off my shoulders. I was free. 6 months later, I was sitting in my office on a Thursday afternoon when my secretary buzzed me. Matt, there's a woman here to see you. Says her name is Rachel, and she needs help with a cheating husband. I looked up from the insurance fraud case I'd been working on. Business had been good since the divorce. Word had gotten around about my recording skills, and I'd become the go-to investigator for suspicious spouses. Send her in. Rachel turned out to be an attractive brunette in her early 30s, wearing a business suit and carrying herself with the kind of confidence that comes from success. She reminded me of Jessica, but without the cruel edge. Mr. Thompson, I've heard about your work. I need to know if my husband is cheating on me. What makes you think he is? She laid out the classic signs: working late, mysterious phone calls, unexplained absences. I'd heard it all before, but I listened patiently and took notes. I can help you, I said when she finished, but I have to warn you, sometimes the truth isn't what you want to hear. I need to know either way. I spent the next 2 weeks documenting her husband's activities. Turned out he wasn't cheating. He was planning a surprise party for her birthday and had enlisted their friends to help keep it secret. When I showed her the evidence, she laughed and cried at the same time. I feel like such an idiot, she said. Don't. Trust your instincts. Better to be wrong about this than right. She paid my fee and left, but not before asking if I'd like to have dinner sometime. I said yes. That was 8 months ago. Rachel and I have been dating ever since, taking things slow and building something real. She's nothing like Jessica. She's kind, supportive, and she laughs with me instead of at me. Last week she met some of my old friends at Murphy's bar. The same guys who'd turned on me during the divorce had gradually come around, apologizing one by one and asking to rebuild our friendship. I'd let them, mostly because holding grudges is exhausting. So this is the famous Rachel, Dave said, shaking her hand. Matt's told us a lot about you. All good things, I hope? Definitely, though he did warn us not to organize any roast nights. Rachel looked confused, so I explained the story. When I finished, she was staring at me with a mixture of admiration and horror. You recorded the whole thing? Every word. And you used it in the divorce? Yep. She was quiet for a moment, processing this information. Good, she said finally. They had it coming. That's when I knew she was a keeper. Jessica, meanwhile, had moved to California to start over. I heard through the grapevine that she'd taken a job with a small marketing firm in San Diego and was trying to rebuild her life. Amber had moved away too, though I didn't know where and didn't care. Sometimes I wondered if I'd been too harsh, if I'd taken my revenge too far. Then I'd remember that night, the laughter, the cruelty, the casual dismissal of 7 years of marriage, and the doubts would fade. Some people might call what I did vindictive. Maybe it was. But it was also justice. Jessica and her friends had thought they could humiliate me without consequences, that I'd just take it and move on like nothing had happened. They were wrong. The recording that had captured their cruelty had also captured something else. The moment I stopped being a victim and started being someone who fought back. It wasn't pretty, and it wasn't noble, but it was necessary. These days, I keep a digital recorder in my pocket at all times. Not because I'm paranoid, but because I've learned that people show you who they really are when they think no one is watching or listening, and evidence, as any good investigator knows, is everything. Rachel and I are talking about moving in together, maybe getting married someday. She's seen me at my worst, heard the story of my first marriage, my calculated revenge, my willingness to destroy someone who hurt me, and she's still here. Doesn't it bother you? I asked her once. What I did to Jessica? Should it? Some people would say I went too far. Some people would be wrong. She took my hand and looked me in the eye. You didn't destroy Jessica, Matt. You just stopped protecting her from the consequences of her own actions. That night, lying in bed next to Rachel, I thought about the recording one more time. 93 minutes that had changed my entire life, that had shown me who my wife really was and who I could become when pushed too far. I'd kept a copy, locked away in a safety deposit box. not as a trophy or a reminder, but as evidence. Evidence that I'd been wronged, that I'd fought back, and that I'd won. Sometimes the good guys finish last. Sometimes they get humiliated in their own homes by people they trust. Sometimes they get laughed at and mocked and told they're worthless. But sometimes, just sometimes, the good guys have a recording device. And when that happens, the laughter stops pretty quickly. I closed my eyes and smiled. Tomorrow was a new day, with new cases to solve